So we're here at the Ummah Combat Gym. You had your fight last night, the MMA, your first debut into this arena. Now some people are going to be asking, but isn't this forbidden? Isn't MMA forbidden, striking in the face, the famous narration?
There is a famous narration in Bukhari which says, إِذَا ضَرَبَ أَحَدَكُمْ أَخَاهُ فَلْيَجْتَنِبِ الْوَجْهِ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ خَلَقَ آدَمَ عَلَى صُورَتِهِ. That if one of you fights his brother, then let him avoid striking in the face because Allah created him on his image. Now, this hadith has been interpreted in multiple ways. This is the hadith that's used to, if you go on Islam QA now, and you ask Islam QA, is boxing halal or haram? They'll say it's haram based on this hadith. Because a lot of scholars, for example, Al-Qurtubi and Al-Nawawi and others, major scholars of hadith have said, striking in the face is haram. And that you could argue is the dominant position. However, it's not the only position. So for example, in Islam, there are people, especially of the Hanafi school of thought, people like At-Tarabushti, people like Al-Kawrani, people like Mufti Ali Qari, and others, many others. Even Ash-Shawkani mentions this in his book as well, fiqh, outside of the Hanafi school, that say that actually this doesn't apply to non-Muslims. Because it says akhahu. He says, for example, إِذَا ضَرَبَ أَحَدَكُمْ أَخَاهُ فَلْيَجْتَنِبِ الْوَجْهِ. If one of you strikes your brother, then let him avoid hitting the face. So he says, these guys argue, أَخَاهُ هي أَخَاهُ الْمُسْلِمِ, his Muslim brother. So he should avoid hitting the face. And they say in this context, what it means is, Akhahul Muslim is like, for example, there's another hadith that says that, this is not their explanation, but this is just to explain it to you. What is backbiting? What's the ta'rif? What is the definition of backbiting? The definition of backbiting is, ذِكْرِكَ أَخَاكَ لِمَا يَكْرَهَهُ. That you mention about your brother, same wording, what he hates. So the argument here is that, well, actually, akhaka here does not apply to non-Muslims, which is why the vast majority of scholars say backbiting doesn't apply to the non-Muslims. It doesn't apply to fusaq of the Muslims either. Even some scholars say, if you go on Islam QA now, is backbiting allowed on fujjar, fusaq? Even Munajjid will tell you, whoever does the fatwas, no, it does not apply on fusaq, and it does not apply on kuffar. So the argument here is that akhaka here in the hadith does not. There is another opinion, by the way. So there are three opinions in Islam. The first opinion is that it's haram for Muslims and non-Muslims. You could consider that the majority opinion. You have the second opinion that it applies for Muslims and it doesn't apply for non-Muslims. And the third opinion is that it's not even haram for Muslims in some context, and that this is just a recommendation. And once again, you'll find this in some of the shuruhat of the Hanafi school. And we've done a video with the Sheikh Zishan in Norway. You can watch the video maybe. We've done a proper bath on this, Maktab al-Shamila, proper research on this, and this is the conclusion. There are three opinions in Islam. Now, it's not my job.
For training, the last one?
It doesn't specify, the hadith doesn't specify training or not training. Because the thing is, the question of this hitting the face doesn't come up in books of fiqh. It doesn't come up in books of Islamic law. It comes up in the shuruhat of hadith. It comes up with the explanation of hadith. And so I'm only telling you what the tradition says. They're trying to be honest with the tradition. Yes, Al-Qurtubi now some big figure says haram, mutlaqan. I'm personally not convinced with this argument. Everyone can follow what they want to follow. There's the other opinion, which I think is very plausible, which is Muslim, non-Muslim distinction. And the third opinion, which is that even for Muslims, because it says it's a recommendation, it's not al-wujub, which means that usually a command is given for al-wujub. But for example, the Prophet ﷺ tells us to do tasbihat, like subhanallah, alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, after the prayer. Okay? Do you have to do that as wajib? No, you don't have to. So some say that sometimes al-amru can be li, for example, al-mustahab. Could be something mustahab. So they make the argument, these are three different arguments.
Okay, so just to push back on this a little bit. There is no harm or reciprocation of harm. Couldn't someone use that as
You can use that for gymnastics.
How?
Well, if you look at the injury rate on gymnastics, I would argue it's probably quite similar to mixed martial arts. If you want to say harm or reciprocating harm, how many people are making tahrim of rugby? How many people are making tahrim of American football? It seems to me like the main tahrim focus is on mixed martial arts because of the hadith. La darar wa la dirar, or the idea of reciprocating harm, it can apply. I'm not saying it can't apply. If someone is deteriorated from a health perspective, then this could apply to them. Of course it could. I'm not saying, but if you want to apply it to one sport, let's apply it to gymnastics. Go and see the injury rate in gymnastics. Go and check it out. Which sports have the most injury rate? It's not actually what you think it is. You'll be very surprised. Diving from the top of the whatever, all of these have risks attached to them. So the question is, where do we stop? So I'm not saying halal or haram. Remember, it's not really my job to do that here. My job is just to transmit what scholars have said. But here's the thing, there is a qaida, there is a principle in religion, in fiqh, which all of the scholars mention, from all the schools of thought, all four of them, which is la inkar fi masail al-khilaf. There is no blame on issues of difference of opinion. This is an important thing. So for example, if a woman believes in the niqab is fard, she has to cover her face. Another woman who believes no, it's not fard, the sunnah, which is the opinion, let's say, of the majority of scholars. The one who believes it's fard cannot enforce that opinion on the one who believes it's sunnah. Because there's a difference of opinion. Put it this way, can you do mubahala on this hadith that it definitely means all people? No. You can't do mubahala, which means yahtamilu dhann.
Okay, so just on this point, what feedback, because obviously you're a very prominent figure.
Yeah.
When you put out the fight, people knew it was going to happen. Did you hear anything other than what you expected in terms of the replies?
I think people are like, sorry to say, the haram police need to really think about what they're doing. Because fine, you can say something is haram, but if someone doesn't believe it's haram, deal with them as if they don't believe it's haram. You're telling me you think it's haram, okay, fine. I get why you think it's haram, I get the argument. But I don't believe it's haram, having looked at it from my own perspective. So in that case, I don't believe I'm falling into sin. Do you get it? You might be, if you did it, you'd fall into sin because you believe it's haram. But I'm doing it, I don't believe I'm falling into sin because I looked at the hadith, I'm not really convinced it's talking about everyone. Even like for example, the arguments that Nawawi and Al-Qurtubi are giving, like they're saying things like, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ خَلَقَ آدَمَ عَلَى صُورَتِهِ. In the end of it says that Allah created Adam on his image. That indicates it's talking about all humankind because this and that. I don't see a connection between the second part of the hadith and the first. I personally don't see it. I'm not convinced. Now, am I allowed to follow an opinion that yeah, just like anyone else can follow whatever opinion they want to follow. Even if it is a minority opinion, so long as it has scholarly backing. We're not saying this, it's not a modern fatwa, this is actually a classical fatwa, going back 1,000 years ago. So that's the first thing. The second thing is this, akhi. Let's assume it's haram. Let's go with the argument that's haram. What is the ruling on car insurance?
Haram.
It's haram. It's haram. Car insurance is haram. The same people that are commenting the haram, they've probably got car insurance. Now, the reason why they've allowed it for themselves...
But they can say that's compulsory and go to jail.
No, but they can take the public transportation. It's not darura. It's not. When it comes to finances, they always find loopholes, no problem. It's not darura in the sense that it causes halak. Halak means destruction. Why have you got car insurance? Gharar is a major problem. I'm not going to say it's a major sin, but it's a problem here. It's haram according to all schools of thought, insurance. But you're allowed because of hajjat. So al-hajjah can sometimes graduate in your mind to the... You don't have any... If I'm driving a car, when I'm driving a car, I say, have you got insurance, brother? Because that's haram. No one says that because in their mind they think it's become so widespread. I'm saying what's also become so widespread is the weakness of Muslim men in a sedentary lifestyle that they live. I'm saying that's become as widespread. What I'm thinking is also widespread is racism in the West. And Islamophobia in the West. Anti-Islam, that's become widespread. Akhi, call it what you want to call it. You can say, well, you go grappling, just do grappling. But the truth of the matter is, anyone who's done fighting knows that if you don't know how to deal with punches and kicks to the body and all that stuff, if you're experiencing it the first time, how are you going to fulfill your functions as qawwam as a man? Answer me that question, really. You got this white man over there, he's racist. I'm not saying all white men are racist, but let's just say you got a white racist for the sake of argument. EDL. He's been doing boxing, he's been doing kickboxing, he's been doing all those kind of things. He confronts you and your wife and your kids in the street. You're in a ghurba, you are in a foreign land, yeah? And then now you're fighting in front of your wife and your kids. He has training, boxing training, kickboxing training, grappling training. You, because of the fatwa, have decided not to do that. No problem. Now let's fight, let's see who wins. 99% he's going to win. 99 because he's trained, you're not trained. It's simple as that. So now you have not been able to fulfill your functions qawwam as a protector because you've been hiding behind an opinion which now we need to start to think about. I'm not saying do whatever, just as we thought about with car insurance. What's more of a darura? I'm asking the question. What's more of a darura? Driving a car or protecting your wife? That's a question, brother. I'm asking the muftis. What's more of a darura? Driving a car, protecting your kids in the street against an assailant, against a racist. If you're living in France or this place or that place. What's more of a darura at this point? Car insurance or that? It's ijma' that car insurance is haram. But everyone has allowed it. Even Islam QA goes, what's the thing of car insurance? They say halal. But they even talk about mortgages now. And the same people, like for example, the Hanafi madhab, there is a view that says we're in harb or whatever, they'll even do mortgages, no problem. And they'll say there's a view. There's so many things that we talk about. When it comes to this, actually it's taboo, taboo, taboo. Fine, if you really should take the view that it's haram, take it for yourself. But what I'm trying to say to you is, don't use it as an excuse to be a lazy coward. At least go and do grappling, akhi, do something.
Or at least understand what the other perspective is. Because look,
Yeah. And go back to letting card from Masail al-Khilaf. It's a khilafi mas'ala. So you cannot force your opinion upon me. Do you get what I'm trying to say? The maximum you can say is, I take the view that it's haram, which is the majority view. I say, I respect that view, I know where it's coming from, and I think you've got a strong view, but you and I couldn't do mubahala on this. Meaning, mubahala means we do mula'an, like I say la'na, you say la'na, that we are right. Which means it's dhanni. Dhanniyu dalala dalil. Actually, dalil is qat'i, but dhanniyu dalala, which means that we don't know exactly because there's difference of opinion on the matter. Do you know what I'm trying to say? It's like one of those fiqhi masail. So if it's dhanni, and now there's a big maslahah for it, we have to reconsider it in light of that, especially as aqalliyat, as minorities in the West. If we don't, there's going to be a big problem, akhi. Then, wallahi, do you know, let me tell you something, akhi. People change their minds when they get rude awakenings. You're walking with your wife in the street, white man gives you one punch on the floor in front of your wife, you're humiliated because you had no prior experience. You could have prevented that with 20 courses of how to defend this or do that, or whatever, kick or check or whatever. You could have prevented it, but you didn't. You didn't. Don't tell me that's not something that we need to look at. And let's be honest, in the UK, there's 75,000 military personnel, active military, there's reservists. We as Muslims are not going to go into the military, are we? We're not going to go into the military because the military does foreign invasions which we disagree with. So you have 75,000 men and women in this country who are, for the most part, non-Muslim, for the most part, 99%, who have a greater deal of training than me and you, than the Muslim community, a 4 million people Muslim community, 2 million of which are men. So you've got, these guys have an advantage. Then you have another like 200,000-300,000 who do combat sports of some kind, who have another advantage over you. Why are we putting ourselves at this severe disadvantage? Give me a reason. Why are we doing it to ourselves? Now you could argue, okay brother, but there's a point where the CBT can happen. You can get CBT. Actually, the studies on CBT, okay, even if you do a header on a football, there is evidence to show that even doing headers on football will give you CBT. CTE, sorry. CTE. It's still an ongoing thing. And I'm not denying the fact that, strikes to the head are problematic. That's why in training you've got to, take it easy. I don't believe in going hard with your brother in the ring, going hard sparring. I don't believe in that. If you've got a Muslim brother and you go in training and stuff, you should be like really putting your punches, to be honest with you. There's no need for like heavy sparring and stuff. We don't believe in that. But doing it once or twice a year, I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying, think about all these other ways you could, okay, if that's the illah, then what's the hukum of headers in football? Since now there's evidence to show that CTE, headers in football, can cause it, that's why FIFA have banned it. So if the CTE thing is you're making it illah, a causative reasoning, then ban headers as well. Make it haram for you to do a header in football. Let's go across the board. So I feel like there's not much not much research that has been done by proper muftis on this issue, because no one has really been interested in it. Yeah, and it's just that over-reliance on Islam QA and traditional fatwa. And I'm not saying this wrong, but I'm saying most people that are commenting don't have access to Arabic language.
Well, they don't even know these things.
No, so because they don't have access, if they could see the books of fiqh in Arabic, they'd realize, wait, there's a healthy disagreement here. What makes Islam QA the arbiter of all Islamic inquiries? The arbiter and the mitigator and the final say of Islam. Doesn't make it. Oh, it's haram because Islam QA said so. I mean, we know Islam QA, the owners of it and stuff. They're beautiful brothers, excellent guys. But we can differ, and they themselves, by the way, they themselves will respect the difference of opinion. On the dinner table, we'll sit down together and say, but this and that, and this scholar said, they say, yeah, that's fine. They will say that. But the one who's following the fatwa will come out and say, no, such and such and such.
But just to end this video, what is your message to the young Muslim man to summarize what you've been saying today?
As I said, I'm not some elite fighter or something like that. But all I'm trying to do, is show the world that you can do both. Bro, there's a woman, because I was researching, who is the most qualified pro MMA fighter in the world ever. And it turned out to be a woman. And it was a British woman, her name was Rosie Sexton. She had a PhD from one of the universities, I think it might have been Manchester or even Cambridge, yeah? And she had a kid at the same time, and she was doing MMA, and she even got to the UFC, yeah? So bro, if a woman like that, okay, and respect to her, from her perspective, obviously her worldview is different to ours. We traditionalists, women don't do that from, you know, in our worldview. But the fact that she could do all those three things at once, that she could do the educational stuff and she could do the fighting stuff, why do we have to choose one or the other? Why do we push our kids that you're either going to be a boxer or you're going to be educated? Why is there not why is there an incongruence between those two aspects? Why can't you do both? I think you can do both, and I think you should do both. You don't have to be Floyd Mayweather and Aristotle at the same time. You don't have to be both. But at least be competent in both. Be able to defend yourself if this is a street environment, proper defend yourself, and be able to protect yourself intellectually as well. Like you can be a Sabur Ahmed of the Ummah, a great debater like Sabur Ahmed, you know, you can defend yourself intellectually. You know, so, or you can be a Shah Kamali of the Muslim community. But if you combine the two, then you have a superhuman. You know what I'm saying? You do have a superhuman. Alhamdulillah, both of you have an aspect of both anyway. But do you know what I mean? You have a superhuman. That's phenomenal, bro. And that's how I want my son to grow up, how I want my daughters to grow up. Being able to defend themselves in more ways. And this is how to give them advantages in the world that we live in. We have to start thinking like that, akhi. So the haram argument, I totally understand. You're trying to do nahi al munkar and respect it. But just think about all the things I've said. I'm not saying halal, I'm not saying this is halal, therefore this is halal, or therefore it's haram. I'm just saying this is what the tradition says, and it's wider than you think, because you don't have access, for the most part, to Arabic. And you don't have access to Maktab al-Sham, you don't have access to it. You can't even go and check it yourself. And most people that are commenting, because they haven't got that access, if they had access, I'm trying to give them that access, maybe they'd be a bit more lenient about the situation. There's lots of masail, by the way, wallahi, in so many abwab fiqh, that there's difference of opinion, which when the other person makes the argument, you think, because I started off like that as well, I started off quite staunch, one opinion in everything. But then afterwards, you start realizing, actually, there's difference of opinion. And then the other guy starts making the argument and showing you, well, he's seeing it from this perspective, he's seeing it. Then you start having doubt in that opinion that you were staunchly following in the first place.
It's part of the spiritual maturity we all go through that.
Yeah, and then you start having mercy for those who have a different opinion to you. Ibn Taymiyyah mentions that in his book, Rafa' al-Malam. Rafa' al-Malam is a book Ibn Taymiyyah wrote, and he's basically saying removal of blame from the people who have different opinion to you. And those people who claim to follow Ibn Taymiyyah, they're doing the exact opposite. Wad' al-Malam, they're putting the blame on the guy. So I'm just saying, like, you know, with these masail, so long as there's wedge, ta'weel and this kind of thing, let's think about it more from a positive perspective.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I hope you've learned in this video some very important lessons about the grey areas, the various different discussions, and at least the plausibility that there may be a wider opinion than what you follow.
Thank you so much.